Once again, we're going to do something a bit different this time around. I don't actually own this game. However, while I was on vacation, my friend Will offered to play it for me to do a review on it. Well, sounds good to me. Now the prologue is over, let's start the review, right? Z.O.E is probably cursed for being more popular for its demo of Metal Gear Solid 2. It has a serious cult following, and it's for a good reason. This game was produced by Hideo Kojima, famous for his Metal Gear Solid series. It stars a boy named Leo who happens to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. The game takes place in a futuristic cyberpunk environment where there are a ton of colonies on Mars. Battles have been starting across the planet, and Leo ends up witnessing his fellow kids dying when a gigantic mech falls on them. Having no choice, Leo accidentally runs into the crotch of a mech known as the Orbital Frame. This particular one is named Z.O.E. It contains an advanced AI with the name of Ada. By piloting this mech, Leo unwittingly begins a chain of events. A soldier from a carrier named Atlantis contacts Leo and tells him that he needs to meet them on the outer orbit of Mars. Z.O.E. is the most powerful orbital frame and is required to save the colonies of Mars, but needs to be piloted by an experienced driver. Leo agrees reluctantly and is dragged into a huge plot between an evil force known as Barum and the forces of Mars, most notably Leo and Z.O.E. The game is an interesting cross between a mech fighting game and an RPG. You fly around the zone destroying groups of enemies that are flying around. These groups are hunched together just like an enemy party will look in an RPG. Once you encounter these groups, they'll spread out a bit and attack you like normal. Once the enemies are destroyed, you'll often get some sort of reward, whether it be in the form of health or ammo for your secondary weapons. It's not required to defeat every enemy, but it sure helps, because each also gives you experience points. Once you fill up the experience bar, you gain a level and get a bit more powerful. It's not immediately noticeable, but I'm sure it probably makes the later battles a bit more manageable. One of the more interesting features of the game is the combat itself. As I said, in order to initiate a battle, you must get within range of an enemy squadron. When doing so, they will spread out and begin to attack normally. While attacking the squad, if you veer too close to another group, they will join the fight, completely outnumbering you. This doesn't mean much though, as there's a pretty competent lock-on system that will automatically change to the closest enemy when needed. You have several different attacks at your disposal to take down the enemy bomb forces. Your melee attack is a simple sword slash, which usually is the easiest way of dispatching the enemy fighters. You also have a very basic gun which does minimal damage but has infinite ammo. In addition, you also have your sub-weapons, which can do some good damage if they connect. But all in all, they're not really all too useful, and the sword tends to do the most damage and it's normally easy enough to fly within range to use it without sustaining too much damage. You also have what's called dash and burst attacks. Dashing is a necessity because it speeds up Z.O.E and also makes it easier to dodge attacks. If you use the sword during a dash, you'll throw a small, quick stab. Using the long-range gun attack, however, fires off several homing lasers, which tend to do not so much damage against regular enemies, but during boss battles, it makes them a bit easier. Finally, the burst attack is a bit more risky because it forces you to stand still, but the long-range blast can do quite a bit of damage. It's up to you to decide which attacks are necessary in which situation. And with the fast-paced combat, you'll get good at thinking on the fly. If it all sounds complicated, it really isn't too bad. There's a tutorial that is very detailed and will tell you everything you need to know about controlling Z.O.E. The tutorial is skippable, but if it's your first time playing Z.O.E you may find yourself wanting to at least take a couple of minutes to go through it. While proceeding through the game, you do get access to a world map. You can choose which area to go to at any time, providing that it's already been unlocked. You may wish to revisit areas to access items you couldn't previously acquire, or just to fight some people to level up. On occasion, you'll also get SOS requests, where you need to go in and save the colony survivors by blasting the enemy pilots without dealing too much environmental or human damage. Once you're done with this, you'll be rated on how well you did. This has no real bonus to the game, other than your final ranking, but don't feel too bad if you can't get a high ranking. As I said, it has no impact on the story whatsoever. Speaking of environmental damage, it remains on the map. If you accidentally destroy a few buildings, leave the area, they come back at a later time, you'll find that it's exactly how you left it. Things don't suddenly rebuild, which is pretty sweet and makes the game look like the colonies are really fighting a war. In addition to all the destruction, you do have a moment where you're forced to enter an underground facility in stealth mode. This is because Z.O.E gets a virus, and if it enters combat, it's too weak and will die way too easily. You have to pilot a fallen enemy raptor to the factory and obtain a vaccine for the virus. Why you need a vaccine for a robot? I have no idea. It would have been better to find an antivirus, wouldn't it? Oh well. In any case, it's not too bad to go around without battling any enemies, but it does feel a bit out of place. Now, These are all primarily good points of the game, but there's a few oddities that prevent it from being a perfect game. First, the camera isn't too bad for the most part, but at times it can really have a bit of trouble trying to keep up. This usually happens in battle against 3 or 4 foes. Once one enemy is dispatched, the auto lock will go to the closest enemy, but on occasion it's like the camera can't figure out exactly where it wants to go. Because of this, some fights look a bit awkward, and even a bit dizzying. It's not a huge game breaker, but it can be a bit frustrating when you can't see exactly what's going on. Thankfully, when the camera does act strange, it's usually for less than a second. The other down point is the length of the game and the final boss, if you want to call it that. The game, if you know where you're going, can easily take under 3 hours to complete. This seems a bit short, even for a game that's loaded for cutscenes. In a game like this, it probably wouldn't have hurt if you would have had to fight in additional areas, given that this is a space mech fighter. The town is large too, and it doesn't seem like you have access to the whole thing. Also, the final boss is a battle against a mech equal to Jehudi's power named Anubis. He's much stronger because the pilot knows what he's doing and Leo is, well, a kid. Anubis kicks Jehudi's ass for a bit, and you have to stay away and defend yourself, presumably to hit a cutscene where Jehudi kicks everything in overdrive. Well, you do get the scene alright, of Leo running away. A short time later, the game ends. What? That's right, you never actually fight to defeat Anubis. You run away, and the game ends. This is seriously a disappointing boss. After all of the build-up, but the game also hits you with a curveball that Jehudi's true mission is to fly into the enemy Byron base and self-destruct, taking it out. Leo refuses to acknowledge this and hides Jehudi, where the game ends. It's not until Zone of the Enders 2 where you see where Leo hides it, but that's another review for another day. That's really all I have for the game. Overall, it was a fun one to watch being played. It has great graphics, an engaging story, infrequent and short loading screens, and addictive combat. Sure, it could have been a bit longer, and the final boss battle still pisses me off, but overall, it's a really solid mech fighter that I'm surprised I never owned. Final score? 9 out of 10. This is Reaper. Happy fragging.
We have shot down the enemy.